Okay, so what can you see right now? I'm just checking.
The art of listening.
Excellent. Okay. All right. So today we're going to cover very briefly, because listening we can actually really do in 10 minutes, not, but it's an introduction and a reminder. So what's listening and why it's so important, what gets in the way, how you can improve your skills, and then questions, of course. So I like starting off with dictionary definitions because it always helps us to get clear on what we're actually talking about. So listening is about giving some attention to a sound. So that's on a very basic level. There's something happening and we hear that. So that doesn't mean you're actively engaging with it, but you're hearing it and you're listening for what feels normal and what doesn't. So then the effort to hear something and to really focus on what's going on. So that then we go from, that's when we start shifting from hearing into listening. And then the next and the highest level of that is to be able to notice what somebody says and to respond to them. So to give somebody the honor of a response. Now, giving somebody your attention is actually the greatest gift you can give them. And when you listen to them, it's really, really important, because there are four purposes of listening. One is really appreciation. One of our core needs is to be heard. So when we listen to somebody and we comprehend what they say, and we've got critical understanding what's going on for them, we can actually offer them support. And why is this so important? Because, again, our core need is to be heard. So it's really one of those things that when we were during the pandemic, when we were all alone, sometimes people were really suffering because nobody heard them. And this is also one of those, and I'll talk a little bit about those a little bit later, is when we are preoccupied and we are not really present, this need is not being fulfilled. No matter how much it looks on the surface that we are there, when we're not really present, that need is not fulfilled. So listening is also too important because it's not just the need to be heard, but it's also the thoughts, the feelings, and the behaviors that others have that really help us pay attention to. So when we listen to somebody and we can identify what they think, what they feel, and how they behave, it connects us. And what it does, it helps us maintain a relationship. What it does, it really builds trust. And that is one of those currencies. This is why we call it paying attention. It's a currency. So when we're listening to somebody, it's a real honor and respect of the relationship. And that's really, really important in a time where we are so task focused and so task oriented that we're really not human beings anymore, but human doings, because we're just moving along and we're just getting things done so efficiently. So the problem with this is that our brains, and you may remember that I talked about this before, that our attention span is what? 8 seconds, right? So since we've introduced the smartphones in 2000, our attention has dropped from 12 seconds, which is not really great either, but it dropped down to 8 seconds. Now, what can you hear in 8 seconds? The average person listens for 9 seconds before they give advice. So what we do is we also process hundreds and thousands of words every day, and we process about 74 gigabytes of data every day. So that's 16 movies. So that's what we talked about last time. Now add to that the unconscious mind processes about 11 million bits of information per second. And the conscious mind processes 60 bits. There's a huge gap. So we've got this overload of information. There's all of this stuff happening. Our attention span gets lower and lower and lower. And at the same time, we need to be really present with somebody. So that can be very, very complex, because when we have to process 60 bits of information, that's enough to understand one person. As soon as we split our attention, we can't process that information anymore, which is why single tasking is so important. So now I've got a really long list, and you may want to write those down or not, or listen to it again. But the multitasking is really the killer of listening. And if you would like to do this, I'll give you a little exercise later. You can practice this with people around you and see what the effect is. The other thing that gets in the way are the time pressures and the busyness. We are just so into effectiveness and productivity that we don't have time to actually listen to somebody. Another thing that can really get into the way is when we buy into perceived drama. Has anybody ever been on social media and bought into drama? And when you think that has nothing to do with listening, it does, because when you read something or you hear somebody talk about something and you already have an opinion about it, and you combine that with limiting beliefs and judgments, your listening can go completely into a different direction. And you may think you're hearing things that the person has actually not said. I spend a lot of time with my clients saying, so you heard this. Are you sure that that's actually what the person means? Is it possible that you've just read this email in your tone of voice, in your emotional state, and you listened to that from that place and misunderstood something? So what we do is we make a lot of assumptions about other people's emotions. So we listen to them and we say, gosh, you are really angry. And as soon as we have that perception, it skews the way we perceive information. Does this make sense so far? Yeah? Okay, so the other thing that we often forget is that listening has something to do with needs. Again, we talked about the need to be heard. But when we have our own needs and they're not being met, if we feel that we're not being heard because we're just constantly listening to other people, or we're doing things for other people, and we have that sense that we're not being appreciated, or we're putting ourselves out for other people, and here we are listening again, then our need to be heard will supersede the other person's, and then we don't hear what they have to say anymore. Lack of self-care, what does that have to do with listening? Have you ever tried to listen to somebody when you're really tired, when you're hungry, or when you're thirsty? It's almost impossible, because being hangry, the emotions get really in the way. When you're thirsty, brain swims in water. So to be able to actually engage fully, it's really useful to be hydrated. And sleep deprivation is one of the biggest killers of any kind of attention management. And you may have heard that, if you can't catch up on sleep, so people say, I'll catch up on the weekend. If you have a chronic sleep deficit, it will impact your ability to listen considerably. Another thing that gets in the way is getting triggered. And I don't know if you're aware of your triggers. It's always useful to find out what they are. When somebody has a certain tone of voice, when they use a certain word combination, or they move their body a certain way, like somebody raises an eyebrow, and you're used to somebody doing that. If somebody else does that, it may impact the way you hear them, because all of a sudden your brain goes into that judgment place of, oh, here we go. And so we can get triggered very quickly. And then all of a sudden, the conversation is not about the other person anymore, or the listening, it's just about us. So the other thing, again, when we get in the way of listening is we put words into other people's mouth. So what we do is we hear what we think they're saying when they really mean something completely different. So what we do is we have words that mean something to us. And so our interpretation of that word all of a sudden really colors what the other person has said. And then, of course, is what really gets in the way is if I have an answer to something immediately. Somebody hasn't even given me the full information, and I already know what's going on. I'm the parent, and you may remember how I talked about the 3 ego states we talked about. If not, go back to one of those earlier presentations. So when somebody comes from that parent place, then prescriptive mode, they're not necessarily in listening mode, because they know better, they know how to fix the problem, so they may not even hear what the other person says. So I had a client once where the wife actually said to me, I'm really grateful for the work that you've done with him, because he finally listens to his son. He is no longer telling him what to do, but he really wants to understand him. And that is a question of ego and wanting to be right. So when we're coming from that place of ego, and we're just wanting to tell the other person what's going on. We're not listening anymore. We're just to hear. We're listening with the intention to reply. And when we do that, then what the other person says is really just noise in the background. So that one thing that can really get in the way, and you will find that, and I would invite you to do this, check this out. It's called self-talk. So we all have these voices in our heads that we listen to. And what they're all about our needs not being met. When we are in a happy place, notice there is no self-talk. We're just present in the moment. We're enjoying ourselves. We're not going, oh my God, what's going on here? I don't understand this. And what's he on about? And come on, let's hurry up. What the heck is going on? All of these things that we say to ourselves that really stop us from being present, because we are just so in our head and we're listening to ourselves that, again, we can't hear the other person. Now, there are two ways in which we listen to ourselves. We can either listen to our own voice or we can listen to other people's voices. Sometimes you will find that your parents' voice pops into your head, your partners, your best friends, your boss, your customer. It doesn't matter. You can have anybody's voice in your head, and you're not really hearing, again, what the other person is saying, but what you hear is what these people say. And generally, none of these voices are very well-meaning. They're often critical and judgmental. There's rarely a voice that goes, yay, excellent, well done, come on, this is really wonderful. Either we verbalize it or we're completely present in the moment. Our brain is wired for all of that negativity. And so what we do is we put this into an inner dialogue with ourselves. So try this out. Have a conversation with somebody and just notice what you're saying to yourself and how much of are you hearing what the other person is actually saying. There are more than this, but I'm just going to focus on two today. And the other one is pretend listening. That's my favorite. There's so much pretend listening going on these days. And that's often on Zoom. I'm here, I'm practicing. I ran a workshop on Zoom the other day, and there was somebody sitting, looking straight into the camera, nodding his head at appropriate moments, seemingly. And when I asked him a question, it turned out that he wasn't actually present at all. He was doing other work. He had moved his things in front of him. So I might have told you that story before, but it is a very common practice. Sometimes people actually have 2 meetings running in parallel. I've talked to people who do that. How much listening can you do when you can't even process 2 people's voices, never mind 2 meetings? So this is what happens when we do that. We have to go back, we have to clarify. When we are dealing with customers, we might go, oh my God, I don't even know what they want. I have to go back and clarify that. And that's really never a good thing. So pretend listening. And yes, so she looks like she's really not care. She really doesn't care. It's when we have conflicting needs. Again, my need, do I want to listen to this person now, or should I be doing something else? Often involves a splitting attention between 2 different tasks. Once again, stops us from being present. You know that somebody is pretend listening when their body language is incongruent. So they move around or they look away, they don't make eye contact. So there are all these things that give you a clue, or they're staring at you. But we're getting better and better at pretend listening, because all of this involves often electronic devices. The problem is it completely disconnects us from each other. So mindful listening, I would always recommend set up boundaries, clarify how much the person needs, how much time do they need, and then make clear how much time you have available. If you don't have time to talk to somebody, say to them, I'm free in 10 minutes, I'm free in half an hour. I can give you my full attention right then and there. I say that you can put things aside under certain circumstances, and they generally involve burning buildings, lives have to be saved, or women are in labor. Drop everything you're doing right now and get present. But if you can negotiate, do that. And then put your devices aside to a place where you don't hear the phone, you turn it off. And if you have it on vibrate, turn off the vibrate or put it somewhere where you don't hear it. Because as soon as you have that vibrate, your attention goes over there. It's very hard to get that back immediately. Make eye contact. It's the greatest gift you can give people. There are lots of cameras now that are over here. So I talk to people And I don't know if they're listening because they're talking down here, and it's because the camera is adjusted down there. So see if you can rearrange that if you're doing a lot of online work. Give verbal and physical nods. Go nod your head and say, yes, really. Thumbs up, exactly, Jay, right? So show that you're actually present. Now, this is the one thing that we're not doing when we're actively listening. You do not have to clarify what you've heard. It's enough to give these verbal and physical nods, okay? Clarifying what you have heard is part of active listening and communication skills. We'll cover that next time. And then by all means, please acknowledge how the other person feels. It doesn't mean that you say, oh my God, you are so angry. But what you can say is, gosh, that must be really hard. Oh, I hear you. Or when somebody, again, if somebody is telling you what's really important to them, you can say, right. Or any kind of things like that. If you let the person talk and don't interrupt the flow, you're going to get so much information. It's the art is to stay present and just being with that person. And that's something that we need to retrain ourselves in. So you have a choice. You can either stay in empathy and connection, or you can choose efficiency. Depends on where you want to go and what matters at that moment. Negotiate or stay present. Thank you for your attention. I've got a course that's called From Distraction to Connection. If you're interested, have a chat with me about that. Otherwise, come and do a little quiz with me, and I'm happy to have a free debrief. Thank you very much.